This week on RSBANDB Update, RuneFest is back after 5 years. From musical openings to skill chips and trading cards, we share the RuneFest experience. Also, Leauges, Havenhythe, and how Jagex will change RuneScape 3. This is RSBANDB Update, episode 1027, recorded Saturday, March 1st, 2025. RuneFest, a RuneScape haven. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of RSBANDB Update, or OSRS Update if you're listening to us on this one. We're doing this episode a bit differently, but more on that in a minute. Cireon is here.
Hey.
Fellow RuneFest attendee in person this time with me here.
I mean, I've been at RuneFest in person for the last few years.
You've been to it more than I have, and you know, a side of the world lends itself to that. But nonetheless, of course, just a general big huge thank you to all of our Patreon members. Since I don't have the list in front of me here, as I'm running with a bit of a limited recording setup, you'll get the full thanks next week when the podcast returns to its full and normal form. But in general, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the RuneFest experience at the convention that we've had here on day one, starting with the floor. Then we're going to go into the reveals for both RuneScape 3 and Old School, depending on which show you're listening to, through the magic of editing.
Yes.
The magic of editing. I say that.
Though, of course, all of you will go and watch to both of these.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
then watch through this first section twice, which is good for retention numbers, right?
And you know, as we like to say, if you're joining us for the first time, be sure to, of course, subscribe to the podcast and all your favorite podcast listening services out there: Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, and more. Also YouTube as well, youtube.com/RSBNB and /@OSRS Update on the Old School side. But with that being said, let's just dive in, because it's been quite a day. I think we're pushing on 12 hours here as we're just ending.
I mean, speak for yourself. I've been awake for longer than that.
Well, me too. I woke up at 4 a.m.
Yeah. Whoa. Well, yeah. Well, jet lag will do that too. But no, I think like about 12 hours ago, just looking at the time, we were just about queuing up doing the Mexican wave inside the convention center,
which I love to get everybody to do, and I'm sure you'll see that on some video going forward. The event held in Birmingham this year, and I guess that's a good place to start. How does this feel compared to Farnborough and London ones?
It's definitely more. It's the location is a little bit of an enigma to me. It's definitely it's a convention center. We were right next door to the National Wedding Convention
and the Equine Convention.
And exactly, which was right next.
Which
to
we won't talk about the ads that have been running on the billboards here.
Oh yeah, they have definitely been doing some targeted advertisements towards vets on the
and animals, and that you can kind of
yes
put that together about where that is.
Yeah, exactly
about it.
But no, all in all, it's been pretty good. It's a bigger venue. I think I've heard through the grapevine that it's been upscaled about by a third
from the last one.
Yeah, exactly. And they did a good job. It didn't necessarily feel bigger and empty like what happened the first time when they went to Farnborough. Like the entire venue felt very empty, with a lot of empty space, and I think they did a lot better this time.
Interesting. That's an interesting perspective to have, and I think you brought that up before, because that was my first one.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, that felt normal to me in that regard.
Yeah,
thought it was fine, but I agree on the good use of space with this. Also, the 3,000 tickets had sold out.
Yeah, exactly. I do think in general, like if you look at previous years, you know, there's always like these videos of like the queue on like streams and like summary videos where people are excitedly doing like the wave and talking. I felt the queue energy was very low this time around.
Yeah,
like there were a few Mexican waves, but
we were in a much bigger atrium than they would have had before. That
Yeah, at least it was inside and not outside that we had to wait this time around.
Yeah.
All in all, it was pretty good. We got in nice and early. I think they opened the venue a little bit earlier.
And the first thing that was apparent to me with that is there's this energy amongst the JMods on hand for this, because this was their first RuneFest back since 2019.
Yes, and for a lot of JMods, probably their first ever RuneFest to begin with.
Exactly, and you could just tell that this was going to be a major event for them, a major boost for how they see the community, just in terms of the energy that brought when they were welcoming everybody in through a long walk from the
that was
it was like a snake walk from the start of the hall to where we sat down for the first.
I mean, we got merch first. I mean, maybe we should talk about the amazing goodie bag we got, which has been...
It's not a goodie bag.
It's absolutely top tier.
It is a legitimate backpack, magnetic snaps, and with that...
it has a laptop sleeve, of all things.
I haven't looked that deep into it yet, so that's neat. Also with that, I think it's a leather-bound RuneFest notebook as well that was in there.
Oh yeah, absolutely gorgeous piece. Like, I don't want to, like, I'm not writing in my past RuneFest books, but this one, like, absolutely want to keep and save.
Yeah, exactly. And with that as well, we got the starting points for the skill chip activities that we'll talk about in a little bit. With that, what else was in there that was interesting with that? Because it was the skill chip stuff.
Of course, there was the paper craft what we had to do. Not that much, I want to say. I feel like I'm missing like a pen or like a thing. No, it was like there was not a lot of content to it. No rubber duck this year. Big disappointment. Like this is one
which explained to the folks why that's a disappointment.
So there's a tradition that at every RuneFest there would be like a themed rubber duck, and I have my own collection at home. I have a dinosaur rubber duck, I have a Viking rubber duck, and I have a dragon rubber duck.
And you know, taken out of context, that's gonna be a very interesting clip.
Yeah. Oh boy. I forgot I'm on the RS3 show as well now, so there's gonna be clips out of this. I have I love my rubber ducks. There you go. Just clip material. We're going to be clip farming on TikTok with this, right?
Oh no.
But yeah, no, great bag. What was in there was trading cards.
Yes. Which I want to get to that, because that falls into the skill chips, but I want to talk about two things first with that. Is that they had a musical open that was a surprise to everybody.
Yeah, even the JMods we talked about did not know that this was going to happen. Apparently, even internally, they had kept this.
So what we had was a mini introduction of RuneScape music set to electric guitar.
Yeah,
at the start,
pretty much. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and the guy who came in very clearly professional involved in that. I think he said his name was Cole Roland.
Yeah, Cole Roland.
Yeah. But he was also joined on stage by somebody unsuspecting that we wouldn't have thought would have performed in this way at a RuneFest. He was joined by
the one and only legend.
The one and only legend, legendary, though probably now god tier, Odd Ash.
Yes.
On the violin.
Yes. No, absolutely amazing. I did listen back. Like, if you've seen this on stream, I did listen back to the sound mix, which doesn't do justice how well it sounded. I think it really, like, the audio levels worked a lot better in person, which, given my previous experience with musical performances at RuneFest, where the musical mix on the stream was probably better in both 2019 and 2018, this was actually, you know,
it was better in person compared to what you heard on the stream.
Exactly. And I also have to say, just hearing the Inferno soundtrack in your chest, because that's how loud it is from now on the only acceptable way to consume the Inferno set.
Yeah, and you know, I wonder with that, will this be released at some point?
So based on what I've seen, starting from Monday, this will be streaming on online services.
So people will be able to hear it in its
yeah, hopefully that is mixed in a little bit of a better way at that as well. But absolutely majestic, absolutely love that. Great surprise to everyone.
And that just led into the energy of the RuneFest Open. You could tell everybody was so happy to be back there again. Mod Mark, Mod Jack, Mod Cireon on the OS side. And they, of course, with that, do have some interaction with the crowd. And the thing that floored me, they asked, how many people? Is this your first RuneFest? And I think literally everybody's hand around us went up.
I mean, just looking at the room, it felt it was like 80%. And honestly, it makes some sense. Right? The number of attendees doubled since previous RuneFest. So you kind of would expect, like, on average, to be like maybe half of them are indeed new, but it was definitely more than half, and it felt a little bit unique and actually.
So is Birmingham easier to get to, assuming somebody lives in the UK, and cheaper than London?
No, London is by far the easiest to get to. Mostly, like, if you look at sort of the train network, it's like a spider web with everything converging on London. Farnborough, of course, was quite a bad location to get to. I was talking with some people about that today. That both times that they did RuneFest in Farnborough, there were actually real construction works with no trains running to Farnborough and people having to use like real replacement buses.
Oh dear.
So like in that sense, I do think that in terms of like how to get here, Birmingham is better than Farnborough. I think that's fair to say. It's a little bit further away from London, but it has its own airport right across that, especially from like European locations or like hub airports like Amsterdam, you can get to really easily, and the trains stop here as well. So
yeah, and then from there, the convention center is walking distance to that airport and
absolutely. I have
station.
I have really no problem at all, and like there's plenty. Like in Farnborough, you could stay next to like in a hotel next to the convention center if you wanted to, but there's nothing around, like no restaurants, nothing to do. And here there's like what's called the Resort World with plenty of restaurants, which was filled with nerds last night.
Yeah, and see that's the entire thing. You would think that 3,000 people in such an area, and the people on the connecting flights in, and you would think that you wouldn't begin to realize who is going to RuneFest. But as soon as that plane left from Amsterdam into Birmingham, it was clear, and it was very clear just walking around the area as well. And that was a bit of a shock to me with 3,000 people.
Yeah, exactly. So no, all good. You definitely notice people, like even in this hotel. I'm staying here in a hotel right across the convention center, and I think most times I've took the elevator or lift here, I've been with other people attending RuneFest. So yeah.
Well, with that, we've been talking a bit about what the initial venue was like and how the event got underway. And of course, what people might not be aware of is that, when you watch RuneFest at home, you're watching for the talks, you're watching for the keynotes and the expanded keynotes that are happening tomorrow. Interesting to note, and you'll hear this at the top of the show. This was recorded on the Saturday. So we're just going based off of the top keynotes here. And if there's any tidbits that come out from the other ones, we'll patch that in as we move through the weeks here. But RuneFest itself, if you're here, isn't necessarily always going to be about the talks. It's primarily about the floor experience, I'd say.
Yeah, it's to be honest, like this has always been a complaint of mine with RuneFest, is that you want to go to the talks, you want to like see all the content that's being announced, but at the same time, most of them are recorded, and you kind of want to take in the atmosphere, do the activities and all of that. So it's always a little bit of a choice you have to make. I think this time we
were pressed for time as it is, only going to the 2 reveal talks.
Yeah, exactly. Now, of course, most people have both days. We are otherwise busy tomorrow.
Yeah, and of course, what he means by otherwise busy is the community marketplace.
Yeah, exactly.
For clans and clan quests plus the podcast.
Exactly.
That's form of media there. with that. So keeping all that in mind, it was basically do the skill chip activities.
Yeah.
Roam around, talk to people, and then when it was time, go and watch both reveals discussions back to back.
Yeah. It's in that sense, I think it's a great thing that they did at the second day, though based on the queues, I think a lot of people felt the need to finish like the skill chips and all of their activities today.
Yeah, and that's you know that can be fairly central to most conventions in terms of long lineups like that and whatnot. So it is something that comes with the territory. And one of the things that did come back this year that goes directly into that floor experience is the skill chips. And this was not present at the RuneFest that I was at, but you have had skill chips for most of your RuneFests. And the general sentiment of this and what happens with it is you go around the floor and you complete various tasks or various activities to get a set of commemorative chips.
Yeah, I feel this is like, I mean, I don't go to a lot of cons. I mean, I'm I'm very loyal to RuneScape, but I think it's a very unique feature about RuneFest, where they basically set out different activities you can do, and you get like a reward for them. If you complete all of them, you get a special 9th coveted skill chip. You can buy like nice display boxes to get them at home. I have all of the ones from the...
So this was completing the collection for you?
This is completing the collection for me. So now I have 3 of them, and I'm gonna keep doing them as long as RuneFests keep happening. But yeah, they're basically like poker chips, like custom prints, and it's a really nice memorabilia.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, so, and it I don't know, you do get to interact with some people in the queue. You do get to do some fun things.
Yeah, and see that also goes into the thing that I've said about RuneFest before, is that it's one RuneScape community at RuneFest. You don't care if somebody's an old school player or an RS3 player, and you would just interact with them on the day for what it was. And they did something very, very smart with one of the skill chip tasks here. One of the things that came in the backpack was a set of trading cards, and to get one of your skill chips, you had to complete a set of 4 trading cards. So you might have to collect 4 gems, 4 fish, 4 types of wood from wood cutting, or 4 types of ore.
Yeah.
And you're not necessarily going to have all these when you open up your pack, when you open up your backpack. And I realize that's a lot of opening of sacks, but if you dig deep enough in the sack, you'll see that this was a good social endeavor for getting the community to actually to interact with each other,
to get 3,000 antisocial people to actually talk to each other.
And see, that's the thing. We say that, and the fun part of it is we were waiting for the first talk to get underway. We were talking with the people around us. We were having people come up to us, figuring out what we need. You even went as far to use your phone and put on big letters.
Yeah. Oh, a lot of people, like if you think about it, back in the day, World 2, going to like the Grand Exchange or like Farrock Square, I think it was.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Want to buy Mithril ore.
Yeah, exactly. So there were lots of people with like yellow or black, just asking for certain things. I think it created a really nice moment of bonding between the entire community right from the get-go. And like what I really loved as well is there were some people who were like also trading if it didn't necessarily immediately benefit them. So like a lot of people were very helpful, and there were also people around like, hey, do you have this? And when you said yes, or like, oh, like calling other people over, like everybody was really helping each other. So that was an absolutely lovely experience. So whoever came up with the trading card concept at Jagex, it might have been a shared idea between multiple of you, but you did absolutely great. I think it was one of the highlights of the day.
And as the day went on, if you weren't able to complete your set, they had JMods appearing around the Grand Exchange with sets of cards that they would just trade for whatever you needed, and there was a chance that they would have the appropriate card.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there was that, and another thing central to RS is penguin hunting.
Yes, so this is an all-time class. I think your year when
I
you
don't
visited
think we had
RuneFest didn't
that
have that, but
no.
it's a traditional activity where they hide eight penguins around the venue with like letters around their neck, and you need to find them all, create a word out of it, and
then you get a skill chip for
then you get a skill chip for that. It's absolutely lovely. It's one of my favorite activities as well. It's a lot of fun seeing people searching around.
The word of the year was Godsword.
Yeah. Oh, you're giving it away now. You're revealing this before the end of RuneFest. Everyone. But yeah, no, lots of fun. Do you want to talk about some of the other activities quickly?
Yeah, we can do that. I think one thing we decided on that the most novel one was pie ingredient tasting.
Oh yes,
but it wasn't actual ingredients.
No.
It was flavored mist.
Yes.
Which, I mean, there was lots of other mist floating around from the various fog machines during the day, but but this was one that took the longest to wait for, but was probably, I think, the most interesting one, just in terms of being a unique thing.
Yeah. With the skill chip challenges, there's always throughput problems when some of the activities take a lot longer. So this one took quite long for us to wait for. We have used some dishonest way to acquire one of the skill chips. I think we could say that.
Well, yeah, it was the Varrock bank heist. So what would you do? What skill would you use for that?
Thieving.
There you go.
So instead of thieving from the heist, we looked at a nearby guard and just pickpocketed them. And you had some bad luck with being stunned.
Yeah, I did. Then I tapped the guard on the head and he fell over dead once I got it.
Yeah, that's also a way to get it. So no, that was a lot of fun. The paper craft you mentioned, so it was like a wise old man paper craft that you had to assemble.
With instructions, so you weren't putting together a puzzle.
No, exactly. So that was quite fun. A bit finicky, but yeah. That was pretty interesting. We did some cabbage shooting. Had to try and hit targets.
Mine went over the wall.
Well, impressive. I got 3 really close shots, but after 3 shots, they just usher you out to keep the food behind.
And you get the chip.
Yeah, you get the chip anyway. And of course, Cook's assistant too.
Yeah, with the eggs that were thankfully fake.
Thankfully.
Well, you seen how expensive eggs are?
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Well, that's probably more of an American thing.
Yeah,
than Europe.
It is. Oh boy, we're gonna go to the supermarket in a few days, and you're gonna be surprised at a lot of things, like how we don't refrigerate our eggs. Okay, he's pulling a face right now, so I think it's time to move on to the next point.
Indeed, it is, and that kind of leads to one of the things that was absent this year is there was no central theme for the RuneFest, but.
Well, the community was the central theme. If you read the booklet,
which makes sense after 5 years, almost 6 years of being absent, right?
Exactly. So this was also the 10th RuneFest. Was actually an anniversary. I don't think it was celebrated too highly, but that's 15 years of RuneFests, I believe.
Wow.
I think the first one was 2010.
Yeah, and they started so small with that it was only a few hundred people. And they didn't know if it was going to be successful, and they actually refunded everybody's tickets.
Oh, yes, that's a fun story. Yes, I wish my ticket was refunded. They were not cheap.
Yeah, and see, I think in addition to that, just celebrating the community, but also the fact this is probably the first RuneFest that you have an equal footing or more than equal footing for both ours.
Again, through the grapevines, I have so many contacts. About 1/3 of the players were RS3 of the attendees, and 2/3.
Really, I didn't hear that one.
2/3 was cool. Yeah, roughly that distribution. Which I think, if you look at sort of the how busy it was at the 2 talks, sort of adds up. That
makes sense. That makes sense in that regard. And
if you look at
the player numbers, that kind of all adds itself up too.
I mean, I think old school is underrepresented if you look at exact daily player numbers.
Yeah.
But we didn't see any. We saw maybe 1 bot, but on stage at some point. But we know there were no bots. So I guess maybe it adds up this way.
Right. And with that, I think that I need to figure out how to read my own handwriting here on my old-fashioned show notes. Yeah, okay. The event was pretty overall well balanced in terms of how they use the floor space.
Yeah, I look, 3,000 people in a small space. You know, lots of jokes are being made on Reddit about this. I think it was fine, honestly. I've been to Gamescom before, for example, and I know about other cons. You know, sometimes you can't even set a foot, like you said, a step. It's just surrounded by people and crowds, and that was absolutely not the case here. It was actually quite, you know, there was a lot of walking room, briefing room. There was a lot of seating space. Like whenever we felt like we wanted to sit down,
Yeah, it wasn't hard to find.
it never took us long to find a place to sit down. So all in all, I think it was a good balance of the space. At the same time, you know, like I said before, Farnborough, the first year definitely felt very empty and desolate to me, and that was not the case here. There were always people around as well. So
and then tons of JMODs just walking around too, not necessarily running, you know, the skill chip stations or preparing for their talks or whatever. Literally, you could just walk up to certain people and have conversations with them about whatever is going on at the event.
Yeah, we're still not getting Elemental Workshop next sequel.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
we tried that.
Unfortunately, the mod responsible for that was one of the few not present this time around. So, we'll keep campaigning for that for all of you.
Which I know we have the fans of that. I know we definitely have the people who aren't a fan of the Elemental Workshop stuff.
So yeah, but like this is your second RuneFest. So before we move on to the reveals, what do you think? Are you? I mean, you had to travel quite far for this. Do you regret it?
No, I don't. I don't think you would ever do that because it's all in the experience, right?
What would you say to people that would have to travel to convince them to try and get tickets next time?
I would say that if you are in the UK or if you're in continental Europe and you play RuneScape, it's definitely something you should consider and you should try and come to if you have the chance to. If you are from a further part of the world, see what it's, you know, see if you're able to work anything else into it. See if you're able, you know, to find any deals on flights or points or what have you on that sort of thing. And if you have the opportunity to do it, make it happen, because I know there are people who went to 2019 and were planning on going to 2020 or maybe miss 2019, and then, you know, we're just in the dark here for 5 years due to the world situation, and that is what ultimately governed my decision here with 2025.
Yeah,
and I think that should probably, you know, be the case for a lot of people thinking about this going forward. And you know, we have to look at where this event was hosted and what else was going to be here in September, right?
Yeah,
With Insomnia and how that went belly up.
Yeah,
and in general, it's becoming more difficult to host these sort of large conventions like this because they don't make a profit in most cases.
It's also it's from what I've heard. This is not something I've heard confirmed about this event specifically, but I know in general, like things like festivals suffer the same problem. Is that a lot of insurances have taken out things like pandemics out of their things that they reimburse for, so it's becoming incredibly hard to cover all the financial risk to things like insurance. Because insurance companies have seen what happened in 2020 and they're not really keen for a repeat. So the financial risk has to be distributed differently, and a lot of companies can't carry that risk.
Yeah, and you know, with that, you start to wonder, and you see what other kind of conventions out there might you know, go away from this. And you know, I think based on what the reaction this year and what we had, I think they'll try and do one next year if they can, probably.
I was sort of worried that this might be the last one.
Yeah.
After seeing today, I have my doubts. I think they will try and do one again yearly.
And you could just tell that from the mods who are here that this is a corporate and personal morale booster for everybody involved.
Yeah.
As difficult as the setup and putting it on might be.
Yeah, exactly. And it sounded very cheesy what Mark said in the opening that all of you have been able to see on stream by now, I think. Because like all of these people that have just raised their hands, they're just friends you haven't made yet.
Yes.
Which it sounds incredibly cheesy, but that is how it ends up being. we don't have the power of hindsight of the Sunday, which is the community day yet, which I think will only reinforce this. But from what I've seen so far, I think, yeah, I don't know, I can't describe it, right? Like, I knew ahead of time that I really wanted to go to RuneFest, and I wanted to mostly go to see the other people that I play with, but there's something about the energy, something about the atmosphere that just changes the way you perceive a lot of things, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I go back to the classic discussion from 2018 that we are one RuneScape community when it comes to things like RuneFest. And a lot of people in the online world don't remember that and don't see it that way, but that's
I think
precisely how it is at RuneFest.
Yeah, I think back in 2018, I think the split was harder and a little bit more problematic. I would like to think that we are on a point where there's a little bit more cross-pollination going on. There's a little bit more cross-communication going on. I think we're in a much better position, but yeah, like events like these strengthen the fact that we do all have one thing in common, as well.
And that's RuneScape, which we're going to now go to. If you're listening on the RS3 side, the RuneScape Ahead reveals, and on the old school side, the RuneFest Summit, the first one that they've done on that.
Yeah, for sure. Let's dig straight into it.
Well, as we mentioned, there was a lot that we saw on the floor at RuneFest, but I think what everybody was probably sitting there waiting for,
or at least at home,
is what the next 6 months to a year plus look like. A little bit more vague at the end of that about content. And, you know, to begin with that, we have launching on Monday 110 rune crafting, which, you know, we knew about coming in because that was on the game calendar and it was on the news post 2 weeks ago. So we knew about that, and we'll have all the 110 rune crafting details about the time runes and whatnot. But I just want to say one thing about this. Avernick and I were right when we said it was going to be somewhere on Anachronia.
Yes, it was possible to play 110 rune crafting at the venue, at the LAN area. I don't think we have.
No,
neither of us have.
Because it's going to be here Monday.
Yeah, exactly. But apparently the time altar is on Anachronia.
So. Yeah, it's very far northwestern tip of it.
Yeah.
As far as you can get from a teleport.
I do believe there's a new teleport spell in that region as well.
There will be. We got more details, of course, on what the teleports are going to look like, but all that will be in the news post for Monday. So look for that on next week's show. But it wasn't all combat and future content or future combat announcements. There was also discussion of the next Invention update, in particular for augmented tools for rune crafting and thieving, kind of like the Rotomatic.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think, you know, Invention was always this... I feel it was always intended as this passive training skill.
Yeah.
That you train and
it doesn't come into its own until your end game.
Exactly. And I think, you know, it's interesting that one of the best things to do for Invention was just, you know, AFK at the waterfalls with Natic and just being able to give you more variety so that you're not forced to just purely train Invention but train it as intended. I'm a fan.
Yeah, and you know, we don't have details yet on how this is going to tie into rune crafting and thieving.
I mean, the timing is perfect. I mean, 110 thieving might come, but we actually know roughly when it will come. More on that later. Yeah. But the timing of this is really good, I think. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, and you know,
and more gizmos.
Yeah,
so quality of life,
perks, which, you know, it's already difficult enough to get some perks that you want, but these are specifically skilling perks.
Yeah, and from what I understand, they want to do some quality of life. So reading between the line, there was some quality of life going to happen around getting the right perks. So I'm hoping it will not be a repeat. That being said, remember the login lockout. I still have that gift that gives me free things. So I still.
Hey, if you ever get Master and Grandmaster combat achievements, you can get another set of those.
Oh, good to know. Good thing I'm really good at PVM, and Grandmaster combat achievements are not going to be a problem whatsoever for me.
Well, you know, they are dancing around the PVM edges because we also have 110 crafting coming on the way.
Yeah, that's gonna be giving the ranged armor, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
which
slowly filling out like the entire masterwork.
Right, because when you think about it, you look at this and you see what they did with smithing, and then the gaps that are in place for, in particular, magic and range.
Yeah,
it's long overdue, and I imagine that by the time we get there, we'll have a better picture of what's needed, and if they can do the retiering for that as well. Because in my view, crafting is one of the most useless skills in the game presently. On the RS3 side.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say I need to sort of turn off my old school brain right now, though I don't think it's the most useful skill in old school either, though old school has a lot more jewelry. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's a new tier of gems coming with a cool set new
that would be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and with that, it seems as though if you look at the general roadmap, they're committed to having a new 110 every 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, which is what they originally announced, I believe, as well. So, and I think now that they sort of get the idea of what works and what doesn't work, right? You know, the first few, like this is what they said, right? Like mining and smithing was the easy one in a sense because that skill is already at a really good state, and
so you just add the stuff to it.
And slowly and surely they're moving into the territory of the harder skills. But now that they know what works, what doesn't work, because we've seen some examples of that as well, unfortunately, I think we're gonna start seeing a steady stream of these, which is gonna be great because by the time they've done all the 110s and they're gonna come back and do the second round of doing everything to 120, they will know so well what works and what doesn't work. I think, you know, we're years out from this, but I can already be excited about the final end state of all of the skills to 120.
Yeah, and that's good to hear you say that because, you know, I feel like one thing that we saw with certain skills that, you know, went to 120, I'm thinking of Slayer in particular and necromancy at launch. There was some gaps there in addition to just the more power that you got from having that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this was already, they knew this already. Like archaeology went to 120 from the start, and I think they filled that out a lot better.
Some have even said it's too full.
Some of you, yeah, exactly. Though I don't think so. You know, I did the entire skill without bonus XP. That was a self-imposed restriction. Even after the what do they call it, the embargo ran out, I kept all of the lamps, all of it away from archaeology as much as possible, and the pacing felt fine even throughout the end.
And you know, they use the words the beloved archaeology skill in a certain context that we'll get to a little bit later in there, but that brings us to questing.
Yeah,
the final 2 desert quests on the way.
Eclipse. I mean, I'm wearing a shirt right now that has a derivative of the quest icon on it. So, sorry, a legally distinct derivative.
Oh, we're doing that early.
Yes,
we're doing that.
Eclipse. We are on the record, so I need to be careful with what I say.
Eclipse of the Heart and Pharaoh's Folly.
Yeah, the other way around. But
Pharaoh's Folly and Eclipse of the Heart.
Yeah,
final 2 quests.
Yeah, I love it's
in April and July.
It's there's a little bit of like looking ahead. There's a little bit of a contradiction in this ahead where they were like, "Oh, we really heard that you like us finishing old stuff," and we're getting the desert quest finished, and I'm like, "A new continent." So I would have rather seen them continue that trend. Looking at Alpasandra, looking at what else is Elemental Workshop. Have to mention that, obviously. More of that, but you know, we don't have the complete picture. So no, I'm hopeful that they will continue to develop something.
And one thing I want to say when it comes to what you said, complete picture, everything we've said up to this point, you could reasonably infer.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
From where we've been.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I speak from a perspective of ignorance because I haven't even done Beneath Scarabus Sands. So
you should. It'd be interesting to see how you feel about that.
Yeah,
the old school desert.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So I it's hard for me to be excited, but you know, desert, the theme has always appealed to me, even as young Cireon back in primary school.
2001. like Mod Shrike said on the stage. That's how far back we go.
Maybe 2001. Yeah, that was definitely the age.
Rescue.
That was definitely the age I was sort of going through my Egyptian phase, actually. So, no, it wasn't related to RuneScape at all. But I do like the theming. I do think there's a lot of interesting stuff they can do. All of the concept art, I mean, throughout the entire review, I think it has to be said, looks absolutely awesome. So I think it's going to be cool. I like that they're finishing thing up. I do like the direction they went with on Old School, which is sort of incompatible with the direction that RS3 is taking, I think.
In general, and just in terms of the content strategy.
Also, I think the storyline isn't why. It might, in large terms, still match up, but I think there's going to be some difference there. But
and that's fine. Like just look at how they carried out Song of the Elves and Plague's End.
Yeah, exactly, and same with the Majorat storyline. So I'm very curious to see how it's going to go. Of course, in an RS3, we free the minor gods as part of
the
Menethos quest line, whereas in Old School, it's actually a raid. And the best raid of the game. Just had to sneak that in there.
Yeah, that's allowed. If you want to, of course, hear about what the Old School site has regarding the raid stuff, listen to that version of this recording as well.
Yeah, they had an interesting announcement related to raids.
They did, but we're not there yet. We have to talk about the Amasket boss and the world's showdown with this.
Oh yeah, that
this is aimed to be.
I think this is a controversial one.
Well, see, the thing is, they want this to be the most difficult 5-person PVM encounter that they have done. Of course, it has the greats behind it of Mod Ramen, who have done countless bosses for the game that people love and play every day. So the RS3 PVM community, when told that there's going to be a new high-level boss that specifically is going to be focused around this sort of world's first push to, see who can complete its hardest mode first, when you look at those people behind this who actually PVM on RS themselves, you get to a situation where the community is going to believe them. And one of the things that emerged, not at RuneFest, but in our production group as we were ramping up to record this episode, is that there's a bit of a concern in particular about how that world first race is going to shake down. And, we're months away from that at this point. And it could be entirely different to what we saw with Samarak and what we saw with the Sanctum of Rebirth.
Yeah, I mean, I think the majority of people are going to be observing the race rather than participating in it. And that's, in a sense, I don't think that's as interesting as a world event where everybody gets to be part of it, which would be more interesting. But, it's... And you're putting all your eggs in one basket, right? Like, RuneScape content has a little bit of a reputation of, exploit early or abuse early, right? Where
when we had the Old School title a few weeks back,
abuse
it to lose it.
Abuse it to lose it. And I think I think games that get live updates like RuneScape, it's not expected that content is necessarily finished on day one. You try your best, but as unfortunate as it is, even the very best QA team can never imitate the number of different scenarios that players are going to do
within the first couple hours of play that people do.
Exactly, and especially when it comes, there's some people in the community which have such amazing PVM skills. It's really impressive. I mean, hopefully they'll you need to strike a balance because
you hope it's not done in 15 minutes. But
exactly. You want to kind of get the best people on board with the playtesting, but then you give them a heads up on the race, and it can't be part of that. So, how they're going to solve that particular conundrum, I don't know. You also don't want to make it so brutally hard that it's not even fun anymore. So, I mean, it can be done, and if it works, if they manage to pull it off,
it could be a new template for producing content.
It's absolutely amazing, right? The underlying, if this is successful, awesome. But I do also think there's a big potential for this to fail And if it fails, I think, that's quite I mean, I don't think it's a disaster, but like you lose sort of a big opportunity, you take it away. So I have my doubts about whether this will work or not. I have never really cared for these races myself, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm not a content consumer necessarily.
And you're also not much of a PVM person as well on RS3.
No, I mean that stands to reason as well. And I do like watching some content creators, mostly on the old school side, who do challenging things, right? Who set themselves challenges and fulfill them, but that's really not live streamed. It's really produced content. It's edited. There's almost a narrative built around it. And I know there's a lot of more not fake drama, but the drama is sort of emphasized that way.
It's emphasized for content.
Exactly, which I think is fine as long as it's not too much. And the problem with this kind of thing is like you kind of have to follow it like Formula One or like a sports match, like day by day to see who's ahead. And I don't know. I've maybe watched too many YouTube shorts for my attention span to keep track of that.
Oh boy. Well, that's coming in July.
So what about the boss itself? I mean, yeah, you are more in touch with the community than me. There was a response from the audience when they mentioned that as a 5-group boss. What are your thoughts on that? Is that the right call?
It's tricky. It's tricky because from my perspective as a PVM person at the mid to entry level high tier, my favorite spot is that 1 to 3 range, just as Sanctum of Rebirth was.
Right, yeah.
And the thing is that if you're at 5, then you're at half of raids, and finding team for raids is inherently complicated.
Finding the team is harder than the raideds.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you go to 7, then you're at the minimum for Angel of Death on paper. But of course it can be done with less. So then you're only 2 under that, and it really raises the question, and to me, what does this look like on normal mode for people who just want to go in and do it solo? Because it will be soloable.
Yeah, I mean, it will be soloable eventually. Let's be honest. That's how
with power creep.
But look, I love Croesus, but it's really a 4-man boss. And as much as it was, I think 4-man is a lot of fun to play. Like I think it's a good group size once you have the group.
Yeah.
But getting the group to begin, we were always one short and trying so hard to get that last one, which is really unfortunate. And like that's always my conundrum. At the same time, I do think that group content is incredibly important, and I know this is going to compete with your other favorite 5-people activity in the game,
which is
Barbarian Assault.
Yeah. Okay. I want to say one more thing on the Amasket boss fight. There is going to be a new necromancy arm guard focused around soul.
Again, the concept of Amasket herself looks amazing, but gear as well.
And we will get that armor with one of the 110 skill launches. They said you'll be able to craft that same kind of looking armor on that.
Ooh.
But the one thing, I don't know if you picked up on this, the one thing out of the Amasket boss fight that drew the loudest cheer, the new melee stab weapon.
Oh, yeah, no, indeed, yes.
And the fun part about that is that melee is very difficult to use in PVM, to the point that I don't even know how to get started with it because of all the switches and whatnot that are needed. So let's just watch that space and see what that does for it.
Yeah.
Then we get to the things we didn't know.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of predicted this one in the podcast Discord. I said that if they were really going for shock value, they'd announce leagues for RS3, and lo and behold, we have that at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see if it even works. I think
because the thing that the group Iron Man has taught me is that RS3 is better balanced around the XP rates of Iron Man. And then if you factor in boost to that,
so is old school, right? And League still works, right? Like that's like you're not gonna play like Leagues is not the experience you should let a new player have, right? So I don't think that's necessarily a problem. Like I have no idea how they're going to solve archaeology with League's XP rates, right? Like it's going to be a mess.
That will be tough.
But like they might literally just, if they do the same as what they do with double XP, they just speed up how fast you ding. You just like
and then,
your artifacts are just gonna come out ding 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 ding, and then maybe they do like a multiplier on the amount of soil and materials you get, and boom, done. Get yourself a relic that banks everything automatically, and you know archaeology is solved. No, my thinking is that you know, old school, I think progress is still a really important part of the game.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of things along the way, whereas RS3 has already gotten to the point where you kind of need to get to the end game as quickly as possible, and then you get into the good stuff, right?
Right. And we're talking about PVM primarily.
Exactly, but also like if you look at how the skills are set up right now, like it's almost assumed that you max, and then the game really begins with all of the 110s.
Which I don't think anybody talks about that.
No, so that's why like it's not necessarily a problem, right? It's a design philosophy difference, and maybe nobody made that decision purposely at one point. It's just like the accumulation of decisions that RuneScape 3 has made up to today in the past has just led that to be different. I don't think that you can copy Leagues and just call it a day, right? Like it doesn't work in the same way, which that's the risk they're taking here. I think they need to be careful and not just copy old school Leagues. I think they need to really think what is the actual challenge going to be, right? Like if they're going to follow
what is a temporary game mode for RS3?
Exactly.
I think you keep the temporary aspect of it, you keep the challenges aspect of it, then you work around the edges of that.
Look, we have Fresh Start Worlds, of course.
That's a blueprint.
Which has a blueprint. But yeah, I'm very curious to see how it goes. It makes sense that they're trying this. I think it's the right time. We saw with old school, I don't know how many listeners here know about old school Leagues, especially the last one started out with a flash and then extinguished fairly quickly in terms of player counts compared to previous years. And I think the fact that they did two very similar leagues 2 years in a row was part to blame for it. And I do see an opportunity because a lot of people we know traditionally only really play RuneScape 3 do come over to leagues.
Yeah. So let's see.
And I'm hoping that we're going to see a similar effect for old school players trying out RuneScape 3. There's a good chance that everybody will be an Iron Man in leagues, which means no microtransactions.
Yeah,
it will be a no kidding, but like it will be a way to experience RuneScape 3 without microtransactions, because that's not going to be. I mean, I hope you're not going to be able to pay for more areas with money.
No, that would just be counter to the entire thing. And, we're assuming they would take like a Trailblazer kind of path where you have specific.
Look, I'm going to openly admit. I mean, it depends on the timing and what I feel like in a moment. But I could very well. I don't know if I would play it as religiously as I've played old school leagues, but I'm definitely coming back to RuneScape 3 to play it because it does sound fun, and I would love, especially since my RuneScape 3 account, in terms of progression, like the first 1,000 skill levels to my skill total I gained like 15 years ago. So
you would be re-experiencing.
I would be re-experiencing that. I do have an Iron Man on RS3. I just don't have any motivation to play it right now. And this would be a really good way to just, go through the early content. Will be a great way to experience maybe some of the 110 skills.
And to show the people out there that the game isn't really that bad. If you have been an old school player, as you might have thought.
Everybody's gonna love Menethos after.
I mean, it's become a star on the group Iron Man character.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I love that they're trying this. I love that they're leaning into temporary game modes. I think they're going to see an increase in players. I'm going to see an increase in cross-pollination between games.
And that's the big one.
And you know, this might, I mean, this sounds like RS3 is dying, which is not the case. But this might be the one thing that RS3 needs, not necessarily to revive, but to show that it is already healing. I mean, that sounds...
No, I'll just take that a step further and to show that the content behind it is good and solid. Because I've had discussions with people actually at the event yesterday that, you know, we talk about what the case is for introductory and mid-level content, and the question is it good? Well, it's good in some places, but it needs work in others. And as we've seen the Fresh Start Worlds, Group Ironman, and every time we're invited to play a new account, the entire thing with that is, how does this go? And the early to mid game has gone exceedingly well for our Group Ironman characters in our group, at least.
No, like I said, I'm very curious to see how this goes. I hope we are going to see a cadence where we have leagues yearly, but they swap between the two games. I think that would be enough variety.
That's a smart call, because with Raging Echoes, a year between was too short.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, my only worry is that, you know, I think a lot of the, you know, I think the learning curve, the skill... I mean, even the skill floor, I would say, on especially things like PVM and RS3 is much higher than in old school. Not to diminish old school skills. I think old school has a skill ceiling that is comparable to RS3, just different skills. But the skill floor is really straightforward. You just equip the right thing, you click thing, and you just whack it. And, you know, there is things like Revolution. There is things, you know, ways in RS3 to make combat easier, but the complexity of gear, of abilities, of rotations, and all of that.
We need to sit down and talk about that on the air at some point, because you say complex, I see the old school system, and I say complex there.
Yeah, we need to have that discussion at some point. But in terms of systems, but like I feel in old school you get away with, like, especially with with combat boosts, right? In old school you get away with imperfect combat. I wonder how that's going to go in the RS3 leagues. Like, the nice thing about leagues is you tend to get power boost. Like, you tend to get, you know,
XP multipliers.
Well, not just XP multipliers and drop multipliers, but you get like special abilities that make yourself stronger. So, like, one of the famous ones is the combat ones in leagues and old school, is that it basically halves your attack speed. So you're essentially looking at double the DPS, right? Now imagine that in RS3, right? Like, the feats people can achieve will be much higher. I mean, that's got to break RS3 in plenty of ways.
Oh, I'm already thinking about a ranged based bolt prod build of something like that.
The question is,
that was how Chuckle was for.
How do you set up the bonuses in RS3 in such a way that even someone who isn't super well versed in rotations can still benefit from it, and that maybe I, as massive RS3 PVM noob, can still take on fairly tough bosses like
Virago
or Virago
solo.
Yeah, Virago solo is maybe, but like Telos or something along of Solak, right?
Yeah, Solak would be.
Solak is a good one, maybe.
And you know, in terms of what the RS3 endgame looks like, you also just have to make sure that this doesn't turn out to be a purely combat specific league, which it could.
Yeah,
it could, but I think that wouldn't set the right tone given the way leagues works in OS.
Yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be curious. I'm looking forward to the reveals. I'm wondering if they're gonna do the same thing as they did in old school, and I think they will, because they're smart. Is reveal things over time, like very as a trickle, because if you like the amount of theory crafting that people would love to do, and the way that they release information piecewise in such a way that the moment, like 2 days later, your entire theory crafting you can throw away and start over. But it does create a lot of engagement, and it's very interesting. So I'm very curious to see how people are going to do that in RS3, which of course people haven't had any previous leagues experience. When old school, you can sort of rely on what worked and what didn't work last time.
You could definitely get to an interesting situation where you have somebody who's played old school leagues come in, but doesn't know the RS3 systems and the intricacies in equipment armor there.
Yeah, exactly. So very curious. I think it's a good call. I think it's incredibly clever of them to do this. As always, I feel this. I mean, I feel this is like the main thing of show. It all comes down to execution.
Yeah,
like the idea is good. A lot of the ideas that come out of
and we'll get to see with this whether my issue with leagues is an old school thing or the content type itself.
Ooh, yeah. That's going to be an interesting one. For those who don't follow our old school show, Shane gets very, very mad at leagues every time it comes around, and then he still insists on playing it like the masochist he is.
It's because I make a mistake and don't go for the hyper optimized route, and that bothers me, and it makes it to the point where I feel like I don't want to play the mode anymore there. So we'll have to wait to see what happens, if that's an old school thing or if it's just related to the content as a whole. But later this year, the other thing, aside from a mascot leagues that people wanted to hear about, was Havenhythe, the new area.
Yeah, that's not coming this year anymore. No, at least a year out for that.
That's early 2026.
Yeah. Yeah, who guessed this? I mean, I've heard several people guessing things.
They guessed Eastern lands.
Yeah,
but not
this
the arc. They were thinking like an extension.
They're technically correct.
Yeah,
the best kind of correct, but no. Look,
this is an area expansion that is going to have content added to it over the course of the year and a half. I think they said
2 years.
2 years, and as you start and you unlock the main area there, the stuff involved gets progressively more darker and spookier as you go along.
Yeah, because you haven't gotten enough dark, edgy stuff in RuneScape lately.
Yeah. And when you look at it from that perspective, this is almost the way I see it, a new opportunity to do things that they might have done had they had a different game title out there. That's one of the things that came into mind. How would you do something like that? But it's also an opportunity to explore what hasn't been explored before. And one of the things that really jumped out at me with this is that there's going to be a new archaeology dig sighting.
Oh, yeah, my eyes might have, dilated a little.
First stage archaeology dig site.
Yeah. Look, I as much as I don't care about lore books and reading long bits of text, I do like world building a lot, and the Lost First Age sounds right up my alley.
This because and to put this in perspective for people who are unaware, we're aware of the God Wars in the Third Age. Yeah. Then in the Second Age, we had the bloody fight between Zaros and the Majorat uprising and how all that went. And this is before that period, while the gods were still asleep, learning about what happened there with that.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I said, I really like, I'm more of a fan of like these older ages, especially like early ages, like what, first, second, and maybe third, because like archaeology is all about layers, right? And I love uncovering the different layers and digging a little bit deeper. And to me, this is, I mean, it's perfect. I mean, people on this show know my opinion about archaeology. I won't keep raving about it, but
hence why they said the beloved skill, archaeology.
Yeah, exactly. But honestly, love it. I think also just the area, like the vibes of it.
The concept art was wonderful.
The concept art was wonderful. Like the Inari, I think, was it called, the Guthix Guardian, and looking at the architecture, it feels like they are actually taking a little bit of a mix between like standard fantasy and the Eastern lands and trying to sort of tread the middle a little bit, and really taking a new and original spin on the vampires, which, you know, the storyline is sort of finished, but I think this is a new enough angle that, you know, it can live independently quite well. And no, I think it's good. I think they're going to have to come up with some explanation of why we haven't heard about this before. But at the same time, you know, in a few years from now, this content will be so integrated with the rest of the game. You know, we know this with Varlamore and Old School, for example, where, you know, in canon, that country has been very isolationist, and the first quest to get access to it is sort of, you know, dealing with the diplomacy of getting access. So,
And then the question is, you know, how do these simple folks of Havenhythe, as they called it, the simple folks there, how did they get there, and how have they been living for so long without that outside influence?
Or maybe they will have always been there and we sort of retcon that, you know, that's always possible as well. But yeah, we'll have to see, you know, it again, and this is not a bad thing, right? It does sound like they're just taking a page out of the Old School book, what they did with Varlamore, and just replicating that on the RS3 side.
Well, yeah, but I feel like the community has been asking for this for years.
Maybe.
New areas.
Well, yeah.
Meaningfully.
Perhaps. I mean, that sounds nice. It's like everybody likes the concept of new areas, but yeah, no, I do like the idea of it. I hope the content is good, but we know very little of it so far, besides the lore and the vibes.
You're diving into that right now, a year plus out before launch. This is going to help us. We just have the general idea and what it's going to be and where it all lands.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's good. I think it's gonna be, you know, you kind of need that new area, I think, to, you know, seeing like 110 rune crafting still makes use of Anachronia. Anachronia has been a very fertile ground for content updates without saturating the existing world, but we are getting to a point where that's reasonably filled out and we need to move on. So it does, the time is right, I think.
Is this going to bring you back? For a bit, at
that's
least.
a tough question. I mean,
because I know the Amasket stuff likely won't.
No, that by itself won't. I think, like, looking, I mean, nobody can tell the future. You know, I think, to me, you know, especially with the time I have, I just don't have time to play both games at the same time, and I have too many things I still want to do in Old School. At least get the Questscape there. I could definitely see myself, you know, using Leagues as a sort of crossway back into the game. I think Leagues, for me, is, you know, like you said, like, you're gonna figure out if Leagues is the problem or Old School is the problem. For me, you know, I know what to expect from the Leagues variant, but I think, you know, Leagues is gonna give me, you know, take away some of the time investment equation, right? Because if I wanted to get back into RS3, I know I need to invest the time, because I know I will want to go for the 110s. I know I want to get for the completion escape. Unfortunately, right? I really dislike this attitude, but that is the sense I would get out of this, because I need to go back and complete a whole bunch of things, and it's gonna, like, the moment I get into the game, I will have the to-do list ready for me. At least the quest list needs to be cleared, right?
Yeah. But the quest list is different.
Yeah, but like Leagues is very different in a sense, in that, yes, there will be a task list there as well, presumably, if they follow the same thing, but it's a very limited time investment where it will run for 6, 8, 10 weeks, who knows. I know I will be done after that. I know I can get to some of the new content, even the endgame content, very quickly because of boosted XP rates. I think that, to me, is going to be telling me whether I like the content for the sake of the content, assuming I don't have to spend time in it, and if I like the content enough to then actually invest time in getting access to that. So, which I think is exactly what Leagues is, I mean, maybe not meant for, but I think that will have that effect for a lot of Old School people, which, if you think about it, if you have only ever played Old School and you need to start a level 3 account, that's a
tall order.
It's a tall order, and Leagues is, you know,
it's a good way to experience the game without committing fully on that.
Exactly.
And being able to see the content.
We'll see. I still have some fundamental problems with RuneScape, and I don't want to derail the show too much, that I would need to learn to see past again.
And just in a word, without going into it, it's the horizontal content aspect
it's
of it.
it's horizontal
to like
well it's multiple things. It's the way that the objectives of the game are framed and presented.
Okay.
I know that's a little bit cryptic, but the problem is this deserves a whole show by itself to just dig into this. I have some problems with the combat system. I have some problems with completionism. I have some problems with XP rates, to be honest, even. So, all of this together. But nice thing, leagues, XP rates, I can ignore. Combat, I can mostly ignore because I will just look at things and kill them, as you so nicely put for old school that you want to happen. All the MTX stuff I try to ignore, even though it's heavily in my face. All of the live events, like all of the continuous sort of spam to combat the daily scape.
Yeah.
That's another thing I really dislike. All of that will be much less relevant in leagues.
And that's why that
might be like, and if I find out that, oh my god, 110 rune crafting is the absolute, goat, maybe I'm willing to sort of see past the failures and go and engage with it. But so I have,
all right, one step at a time then.
Exactly. And for all of you RS3 people here, I know we haven't gotten a leagues announcement in old school, but let's make a deal, right? Let's make a deal. I come and play and do RS3 leagues, but next time old school leagues comes about, should definitely come and try it.
Yeah, I think that's
because by then we will have like HD mode on the client, so it will even look good. Yeah, I think that's a good deal. I think I'm gonna make that deal with the listeners right now. They have no say in it, but
a contract is a contract. Vyres, Vampirium have access to that world.
Yeah, because access to a different world worked so well last time they added a new world. Yeah, exactly.
Which again, we can't put too much into this, so we're just gonna leave that one there.
Yeah, but I wonder how the world gate gets access to Vampirium.
Ooh, that's interesting. It's interesting. There's a new skill in development.
Yeah. The timeline for that releasing sort of lines up with that being in line with the new area, right?
Maybe. I got the intent that we might be looking for summer 2026 on that.
Well, yeah, but we won't have the completion of the new area until the end of 2027. So I think we will be in the middle of releasing the new sections of Havenhythe,
and then you can tie those together.
So I'm curious if the new skill might integrate with it. That being said, I think the new skill is in design, what they said, but the most important thing, and I want to emphasize this, is that because they're so early on, the reason they revealed it
is because the survey is coming.
It's because the survey is coming. So this is your chance to, ask for what you want. I doubt we're going to get another combat skill.
I don't think that would be a good idea.
But what do you want from a skill? I think that's the moment to release it. To share
about that, to talk about discussion.
Exactly.
Which is something we should do for content somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. So go and do that. Go and do the survey. Really take your time for it. Use the open-ended fields as well, because I do think it gets read more.
Yeah, they read that
more than you would think.
So, we also got no. That's the end of the content notes. But we did want to just talk about the general tone of the keynote here. That we had.
It's a new road, right? No pun intended, by the way. A new road that they sort of started on last summer with the...
it feels a lot like old school.
It feels a lot like old school. And again, we've been saying that several times, and it's probably not a coincidence that we had was it Kieran? Or not Kieran involved with RS3 taking over as executive producer.
No, it was Mon Marcos.
Oh, Mon Marcos. I am. Yes, you're right. Mon Marcos taking over. I think that is not quite a coincidence, but also, we have had this period where RS3 needed to reinvent itself.
Yeah, and that's what they said coming into this keynote, was that now you're starting to see the fruits of that and seeing
exactly
how this has landed. And now that they've had 2 of these things before, delivering on the content and providing them,
exactly
they can carry this forward now.
Exactly. And, you know, it's been very successful with old school, I think. I mean, it's hard to not comment on the old school reveals right now, but like it's going to make it a little bit harder to have surprises. You know, we knew the new area expansion was coming. We now know it's coming, which means there's going to be minor surprises, but they're not going to be able to you know, pull the same level of stuff as before, because, or at least not as short to release, right? Like they couldn't have announced like 110 rune crafting without talking about it before.
Yeah.
For Monday, right? Which we've had some crazy reveals at RuneFest before, I think, that came fairly quickly.
Yeah, and you know, I'm of two minds with that. It's nice to get the hype involved around that and the surprise, but at the same time, it's also nice to know when it's going to arrive.
Well, your podcast planning is showing, Shane.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. But look, it does create more of a dialogue between the community and staff, I do think. And ultimately, I think it's a sacrifice worth making. You know, things slip, but you know, we had a slip being announced on old school, and I don't think anybody really cared because we all want good content, and we, you know, knowing that there's a constant stream of content coming up, you know, I think that's the most important thing. And like, it's funny because I see so many parallels with work, right? I keep telling my colleagues, like, if your work is delayed and we need to account for it, you know, I'm not going to have a great day if you tell me that, you know, your work is going to take longer. But ultimately, you know, telling us early and being upfront about it is going to make everybody happier and will accommodate.
And I think that's a two-way street too, both from Jagex themselves and the community on that, in terms of reading into that and accepting it.
Yeah.
So
no, look, all of this
overall, it's in a good spot.
It's in a good position for sure. It's I don't know. It's definitely more in line with more recent RuneFests, where it's subdued. It's not overly ambitious. It's not overly aspirational, right? It's fairly concrete. We can be pretty certain that what's announced will come. Maybe not quite at the time frame that they announce. Things always happen, but yeah, I think
that's a good way of summing it up. And when we look at where everything is, with that, you get to a situation, you realize that this is starting to become a different game than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, and not in a bad way, I think. And it needs it. Like it's again, I don't want to say that the game was or is dying. It really was not, but I do think it went through a little bit of an identity crisis. And I do think the numbers speak for themselves. If you look at player counts on old school and RS3, it's not just the bots that make the difference, and unlike what some people might like to think.
Yeah, and with that, then you get into the entire thing we talked about with the leagues aspect, is that if you can get more of that cross-pollination going on, you have a good thing.
Yeah, and this is the thing, you know, RS3 does need to sort of crawl out of a well again a little bit. I think they lost a lot of goodwill. I think they lost a lot of players. I think, you know, that is something they really need to start getting back. But as long as they keep consistently releasing roadmaps like this
and execute
on it, then, you know, I think it's great. You know, we've seen what they can do with the storyline with the fort. I know there's some controversial parts to it, but all in all, I think, you know, you could speak.
It's a good trial balloon.
You can speak from the group Iron Man perspective, but I think it massively changed the progression of the game.
It changed construction a lot.
Well, we got the woodcutting updates as part of it, right? Like a lot of things hitchhike alongside updates like that. So if they can, you know, continue to sort of follow that blueprint, taking the lessons on board from Baltimore, from old school.
Yeah. And that gets to the whole underpinnings of this is that this is setting the roadmap for what was, in the past 18 months, the experiment. And now we're seeing what this looks like
Yeah.
fully involved when you get to things like the area expansion,
Yeah.
leagues, the new skill on the horizon. Because everything before there we knew in some form or another. And the fact we have, and this is where the world famous title came from, pitching a tent for RuneFest, the need for tent poles. Tentpole content going in order. We have the 110 rune crafting update. I'm not going to include the augmented invention stuff in there because we don't know how that's going to be. I'm not going to include that as a tentpole. But we have the finale of the Desert Quest series. We have the Amasket boss fight. We have leagues. We have the area expansion that will have a new skill at some point. And those are all key markers in the game's history where they're able to set a tone, bring people in, and grow the player base and set the marker for what RS3 is. And I said a few weeks back, what do they need to do at RuneFest here? They need to put forward a plan that involves these tentpole pieces of content, which I think we have.
Yeah. I mean, I think the question is really going to be like, is it too little too late, right? You know, the MMO market is, I don't want to say saturated, but I think your target audience is small. I think, you know, younger generations aren't really pulled to continuous repetitive tasks anymore as much as, you know, our generation was, I would say. You know, looking around RuneFest, looking around the floor, you know, there's not a lot of young children looking around. I would say there's not a lot of people in the 20s around.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people of our age. Are you going to be able to talk to a whole new generation of players at all? Because as much as RS3 wants to grow, they probably ideally want to do so without cannibalizing old school at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
or you accept the fact that these are two games that share its player base, and you have updates coming in at various times that encourage people to move back and forth.
yeah, but none of the games, given the time investment, that's not a likely scenario. People will pick one over the other typically.
Yeah, and stay there for the long term just because of the investment. Yeah.
Exactly. So we'll see. I don't want to end this on a sad note.
No, it's not.
That's
the
great, but
reality.
like there is a lot to prove. There is a lot, you know. There's still a long road ahead.
And there's lots to be excited about too.
Exactly.
And I think that's probably a good point to leave this, unless you have anything else.
No, I don't think so. You know, there's gonna be more details coming out, I think, as early as tomorrow, probably, knowing our luck when it comes to these shows.
Hence why we figured let's just focus on the top level bullet points of the ahead keynote.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I always like to end with a note on engagement. You know, especially this one, for everyone. We're on Discord. Please leave your thoughts on the roadmap, including maybe on the things that we didn't cover. We skipped over some of the seasonal events and an absolutely Quacker's Quest. So, and you know, they didn't even mention everything on the roadmap.
There was a game health update.
There's a game health update coming. There's another quest coming, actually. I think in the month that the Mascot boss is coming out. I saw something else that just slips my mind, but you know, lots of cool things coming. Maybe there's something we missed, so let us know.
And let us know what your favorite was too. Not necessarily just about the RS3 stuff, but the RuneFest coverage in general.
Yeah, we'd love to hear. And you know, if there's any questions you have about how we had it, any floor experience, we'll be monitoring Discord. Happy to chat. Yeah, I don't know if this show is going to come out before, or you're going to be listening to the show before we even leave. If you want to do a really quick turnaround, we'll try and monitor Discord. But I'm Shane is pulling faces. I think he really just wants to go to bed. So
it's getting to that point. We'll see how I feel when I get back. But we're leaning in that direction right now, and I'm realizing that at the length we're at, I might not be able to process all of this in one go. So we'll wait and see how this goes. Fingers crossed on this. This is entirely new for me taking the show on the road. If it comes out, that's good. I fully intend it to within at most 48 hours from recording, if not less. But if it doesn't, then something has horribly gone wrong.
All right, I think that's all I wanted to say from my side.
All right, fair enough then. Well, of course, you know where to find the show. Update.show, Discord, update.show/Discord, friends chat in-game at BitsBytes. And of course, if you want to subscribe, all the podcast listening places, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, update.show/subscribe, and youtube.com/RSBANDB. But we'll see you next time for another episode of RSBANDB Update, covering the finer details of 110 rune crafting, maybe some more RuneFest stuff. See you next time, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.